You're listening to How to 20-something, the best podcast that helps both men and women navigate their 20s and learn how to adult across all aspects of their lives. We're going to focus on career, relationships, finances, fitness, nutrition, and all of the common challenges and obstacles a typical 20-something will face in this post-college life. I'm your host, Jess Diamond, and I am the CEO and founder of Jess Diamond Coaching, where I help young professionals get their shit together, gain their confidence, and own their life. No one prepares you for this adulting world, so allow me to help you feel like you are no longer a chicken running around with its head cut off, and that you actually know what the hell is going on and what your next step to take is. Welcome to How to 20-something. Welcome back to another episode of How to 20-something with me, your host Jess, and a very special guest and good friend of mine, Carlos, where today we're going to talk about whether or not you should go back to school to further your education. Now, everyone's reasoning is going to be different, so this is just one perspective for you to consider when trying to make your decision. And if this is something you're really torn between with whether or not you should go back and what that means for your current and future life and goals, then please know this is what I help support 20-somethings with. So as a reminder, go ahead to the show notes and click the Let's Chat link and schedule a day and time that works for you so I can help you feel confident about the decision you're making and a plan to get you going. Because this is not a decision you should be making lightly, as it does require some thought, and everyone's back to school experience is going to look very different too. For example, I have clients and friends who went back this year and still work at their full-time jobs. I have friends who completely quit their jobs and are a full-time student, and I have clients who are part-time in school and full-time working. Regardless of the decision you make, you need to know how to best prepare for the lifestyle and the sacrifices that accompany this decision, and that's what we're here to help you gain insight on today. And hopefully by the end of this episode, you'll know whether or not this back to school life is for you. Also, while you head to the show notes to schedule a call with me, go ahead and sign up for my next workshop called Find My Friends. It is a free 1-hour Zoom call on Wednesday, September 25th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, and it's for young adults who want to know how to move an acquaintance along the friendship scale to best friend or core person level. Because meeting people is easy, but meeting your people is hard. And again, you can find that link in the show notes, or you can go to justdiamondcoaching.com/friends and put in your information. But you have to sign up in order to receive the Zoom link, the replay, and the worksheet, whether you can make it live or not. But back to the show. While you go sign up, I'm going to first introduce who you'll be listening to, and then we'll get right into it. Carlos Piedrahita is a rising second year at Harvard Business School pursuing his MBA. After originally finishing his undergrad degree at the University of Florida with me, he worked at Deloitte Consulting in customer strategy and later on with Grubhub doing sales strategy. He spends his limited free time traveling, many times have been solo, playing team sports like rugby, and attending as many speaker events as possible. Carlos hopes to use his MBA to pivot into the intersection of media and technology in some capacity. Hi, Carlos. Welcome to How to 20-something.
Thanks, Jess. Happy to be here.
Of course. I'm happy you're here. Now, I want to start with the most pressing question, and then we'll get into more of the nitty-gritty details later on. But what sparked this motivation to return back to school after being in the working world for a few years? Or is this something you always knew you were going to do, that you would go back to school to further your degree, your education?
Yeah, so on that latter piece, I always thought I'd want to further my education. I think education is something that people can never take away from you. And I had started studying for my GMAT, which is the testing you take to go back to B school. And I wasn't taking it super seriously. And it wasn't until I had just moved to San Diego. I was enjoying my time there, but I felt like pretty stagnant in my career. It was just like putting in the hours day in, day out, but like I didn't have a direction. Not something I was like working towards. And I started to wonder, like, what am I passionate about? Like, what am I trying to do? And after I gave it some more thought, I realized I wanted to pivot industries. And an MBA is a really good way to pivot to do that. So once I had an idea, I started brainstorming, all right, what's my actual story? What's my why behind getting an MBA? And once it started to make sense that an MBA made sense for me, then I had a direction. And using that direction, I was able to study and do everything I needed to do to finally make it to graduate school.
And now here you are, which I think is incredible. So, throughout this entire process, the studying, the applying, the accepting, and now attending, do you ever worry that this was all for nothing, that you're going to change industries and feel that same lack of direction? Not not to instill a fear in you, but is that a thought that has crossed your mind?
Thanks for bringing up some anxieties again.
It's what I'm here for.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think that fear is always going to be there. I think very few people in the world get lucky enough where they know exactly what they want to do and are able to find opportunity to do so. I think at the end of the day, sometimes work is just work, and you find fulfillment through other means. But I think the idea with getting my MBA was to at least attempt to get closer to my passion in my everyday career. And I do worry after I graduate that we're going to go back to square one, perhaps in a different position, perhaps in a different industry, but maybe again, I'm just aimlessly putting in my hours day in and day out and not working towards something. But I think an MBA is a really good way to kind of take some time off, not have to focus on the same industry, learn about different careers, different industries, different classes, meet different people that come from different walks of life. And through that, you're able to kind of identify, like, all right, this is kind of what I like. Oh, I've never even heard of this career. Like maybe this is something I want to pursue. And maybe I'm not one of the lucky ones and I figure out what I want to do after these 2 years, or maybe I am. But I think I don't regret it. I think this was a great, like, eye-opening opportunity for me to kind of understand what's out there.
Yeah, because even then, if you do end up back at square one, you're never really at square one because you've been in this situation before. Only now you have additional knowledge as to what you can do this time so you get a different outcome. And I know I would rather live a life of I dids and not what ifs. So if you didn't go, even try to go back to school, you would have constantly been thinking to yourself, oh, but what if I did? And it's that fear of regret that helps drive the scary and risky decisions that we make, like going back to school.
Absolutely. My high school quote in my high school yearbook is, you regret more the things that you didn't do than the things that you did. And you're right. I'd always have that nagging feeling of what if I did my MBA? Like, where would I be in the world today? And since this was a goal of mine, I'm happy to do it. And no matter the outcome, I'm proud of it.
Yeah, I love that. Was there a moment when you were like, yep, this was definitely the right decision for me?
Yeah, I think so. Besides the feeling that I had like a direction, and besides being able to very humbly get into Harvard, which is something I never thought I'd be able to say, once I got onto campus, being in this environment, surrounded by so many ambitious people, all my peers, everyone comes from very impressive career backgrounds. Everyone's working like on a startup, or they want to go into finance, or they want to do whatever. All that was very exciting, and it wasn't until the speakers that came to campus that I'm like, okay, I made it. Like, this is like super cool. And when I say the speakers, I think I'm very blessed to have the opportunity where some of like the greatest minds, some of the most accomplished people come to Harvard Business School campus, and they just like very randomly, just on another week, be like, yeah, this founder of this very notable company would be here, or this famous sports star will be here, or so and so is talking about how they started their $1 billion business, and it's super cool. And I think once I saw that we're now in the midst of like some of the greats across the world, I'm like, okay, no matter what happens, I think being in just the presence of this like intellectual curiosity will help me shape the future for me in a better way.
Are you allowed to name drop who your favorite speakers have been? I hope it's not classified. I don't think it would be, but who have been some of your favorites?
I think I'm allowed to name drop. I think so. What's cool about the campus is, so it's based. They use a case method to teach the class. We don't need to jump into the academics. However, the case method usually has a protagonist on this case, and a lot of the time they'll bring in the protagonist, and the protagonist will be like, "You guys had a really great discussion. I really enjoyed X and Y Z points." this is what I actually did, and this is what was the outcome. And I think that's such a cool way. Like you put like your mouth where your money is. Is that the saying? Whatever the saying is, and it's super cool because like you're actually learning from the people who did it. Sometimes you get some really cool speakers through that way. Other ways, you'll just have people like come to campus. We had Kevin O'Leary. He hosted just like a Shark Tank special where like some startups pitched to him. I think my personal favorite, each of the clubs, there's like industry related clubs, and they'll bring in speakers related to whatever industry the club is tied to. The Retail and Luxury Club has some really good ones. They'll bring in like the CEO of Lululemon, like the CEO of like North America for Louis Vuitton. Those are some really cool ones. But I'm part of the Entertainment and Media Club, and I'm actually on the board now. It's something I'm pretty passionate about. And they brought in Michael Jackson's lawyer, and that was just like super interesting because he had some stories that like you're not gonna find online. So it's just like the most like random things like on a Tuesday, just being like, yeah, Michael Jackson's lawyer is in town. Let's just see what he has to say for 60 minutes. And it's super cool.
Oh, that is pretty cool. And it gives you this opportunity to network with people that are really high up and really successful with what they're doing. And as a way you can learn from them and learn the real life scenarios behind it. So I loved all of that. And I will even say that networking is powerful. It's building connections, and you need that, whether it's in grad school or not. And it's probably one of the main reasons people decide to go back to school. Can you talk about how you have been able to network for yourself, or any tips for my listeners about networking when it comes to going back to school versus networking in the real world?
Absolutely. So you're absolutely correct. Networking is one of the main things, if not probably the main thing a lot of people say go back to school is good for. Unfortunately, academics is like not even top three probably in that list. But I will say, networking, you need to be very intentional with it. So if you do go to a top MBA, the brand name is just going to carry some weight no matter where you go, no matter where you go in your career. There's an alumni network that want to support other people within that network. I mean, even we both went to University of Florida. There's alumni who are further in their career who want to help fellow Gators. It's the same idea for people that come from these MBA programs. The difference the slight difference that I'll say, not that Gators can't make it like far in their careers as well, but I will say some of these alumni are maybe very well connected in certain industries that can maybe open some doors from you. I think the idea where you have to be intentional is when you're a student, you can get away with so many things. So sure, when you graduate, like maybe other Harvard people will like help other Harvard people, but like when you're a student, you can go and just LinkedIn message the CEO of some company, and they probably won't respond, but like you'd be surprised at the response rate you do get. Everyone wants to help students because everyone remembers their time fondly, generally, of when they were back in school, and they'll like hold coffee chats, and that's what something they very emphasize at school. Like use these 2 years, use the time when you have a .edu email to reach out to these alumni, learn about the industry, get all the information you need. Because after you graduate, you sometimes become irrelevant, but you get these doors open to you. And to the point I was making earlier with speakers that come from the clubs are completely student run. So it's not the school administration that are bringing these speakers in. It's just students reaching out to the CEOs of these companies or like these very notable speakers and saying like, "Hey, would you want to speak at a club meeting or at Harvard?" And you'd be very surprised at the response rate you get. I was fortunate enough to help put on the media entertainment conference, and part of my job was reaching out to these speakers, seeing who would come, and I was surprised at the responses I was getting at cold emails just because I had a HBS email address.
I don't even think about the email address and how valuable having a .edu is, but I want to fast forward to right now because as I mentioned when I was introducing you, you are a rising second year, meaning you just completed your first year and have a break over the summer where you've been doing an internship in New York City. Did you go about finding this internship yourself, or is it required to graduate from your MBA?
Yeah, so the MBA program's generally a 2 year program. There's, depending on the MBA program you go to, there's some maybe accelerated programs that are only a year. Generally, the international MBA programs are a year, and the United States programs are generally 2 years. And with the 2 year program, there's a summer in between the 2 years. Obviously, that's where we are right now. And an internship is actually a required part of your curriculum. And an internship can take many different forms. It doesn't have to be a traditional internship that you do at a company, which I'm doing right now in New York. I have friends who are working on their startups in Boston. All you got to say is like, this is my startup, this is what I'm working on, and HBS will provide resources and they'll take that as a credit. You can even help your fellow classmates startups. As long as you're working on something over the summer, then they're okay with it. But the idea is like, you're not taking the summer just to go travel and like take a break. You're taking the summer to have a free schedule of classes, but further whatever career interests that you have.
Okay, so you need an internship to graduate. One of the things that I regret about my undergrad experience was they sort of required an internship. And what I mean is that the summer between your junior and senior year, you had an internship credit that you needed to complete. Also, only during that time could you go study abroad, and your study abroad would count towards your internship credit. I don't regret studying abroad at all, but it did make it a lot more challenging for the five of us who did choose that option to land a job after graduation. But that's neither here nor there. Can't go back and change the past. I am glad that Harvard requires you to have an internship throughout this MBA program. And I want to know, this might be a little personal, but from a financial perspective, are all of these internships paid or does it not matter? Are some unpaid? Are some really lowly paid? Like, what's the range, and is that part of the requirement?
My internship is paid. And if you're looking for more context with like that breakdown, I have friends who are getting paid at a very high scale, going from very big professional service firms, finance, consulting, you name it. I have friends who are maybe in retail, maybe more like a general corporate function, who are still getting paid, but perhaps not at a very high scale. And then I have friends who reached out to like startups who are like, "Hey, I want to intern for you," and they're like, "Well, we can't pay you." And be like, "Oh, you don't need to pay me. Like, I just want to intern for you." And what something that's really great at HBS, I'm sure some other MBA programs do as well. There's a fellowship for the summer where if you want to work for a certain company and perhaps they're a startup that's bootstrapped and they can't afford to pay you, they'll give you a stipend or they'll work with the company to like match whatever they pay you. So then perhaps you're not getting paid at the top of the scale of your peers, but you have some sort of income for the summer to sustain your living.
Oh, I love that Harvard does that. And I also want to clarify for the audience that every time Carlos says HBS, that stands for
Yeah,
Harvard Business School.
that's what it stands for. We might have to put a disclaimer. Harvard Business School equals HBS. So let's put that in the beginning because I'm sure I've already used that a lot.
Yes, thank you for clarifying. Now, I know a large part of making this decision is knowing you have the support from people you care about. How did your friends and family react when you told them you were quitting your job to go back to school? I know my reaction was, wait, you're smart because you got into Harvard, but what about other people that care about you?
Yeah. Thanks for that, Jess. Yeah, it's crazy because depending on your background, depending what schools you went to, depending what careers you went to, this whole like graduate school or MBA programs, like for like partly for me, it was kind of like shrouded in mystery. And a lot of my friends, people I grew up with, like don't really understand that like the MBA world. People get it, like that's a degree, but a lot of people do part time or they'll do it online to save some money. And I think that like the very consistent reaction I got from my friends was like, "Why are you quitting your job? Why don't you just do this on the weekend or whatever?" Um, and I think many people look at it as like almost like a certification. And the way for a lot of these top MBA programs work is when you do the full time MBA program, it's less about just getting a certification. It's honestly like not even top five reason to like just get it on your resume. It's to the point we were saying earlier, it's about the networking. You're fully ingrained with your peers for these 2 years. You're fully ingrained with alumni and speakers and whatever. It's about being able to take classes like Monday through Friday. It's about being able to clubs, about to able to do like recruiting full time. It's getting the full experience that if you do it online, you do it on the weekend, you don't really get that. And you can only get your MBA once. So if I'm going to do it, I decided I want to do it correctly. Jumping back a little bit to what my family thought. My family's similar. They haven't gotten their MBAs. They don't really understand that world either. I think they were just happy for me to do whatever I wanted to do. It looked like I was pretty passionate. It looked like I was pretty informed. At first, they were confused with like the finances. Once I explained how much it actually costs, they were like kind of surprised I would do it because I did have a good career coming out of undergrad, and I was on a good trajectory, and they were confused as to why I would give that up to go back to school. But once I maybe explained to them and I showed how passionate I was, they were happy for me. And I think one thing that really like calmed their nerves and something that I was excited about is even though it is expensive, like I look at it as a bet on myself. So instead of like investing my money in the market or investing doing it, I'm investing my money in me. And I'm getting education. I'm opening these doors, these opportunities. Maybe it pans out, maybe it doesn't. But if I'm going to bet money anywhere, I bet it on me. And I think with that, like my parents were like really happy with that mentality. So hopefully I can live up to it. Hopefully the house falls in my favor. But that was generally the idea. And I think my friends still don't understand some of it, like how I'm taking out loans or like paying for school, or like they'll see my Instagram stories and they don't even think I'm at school. Like that's probably a whole other topic we can talk about later, but that was generally the consensus.
Yeah, I'm definitely in that group that is thinking, this guy's just back in his college glory days, off partying and
College forever.
traveling. Is he even getting any work done? But I am glad that you brought up finances when it comes to paying for school. And I think the fear of debt is what prevents a lot of people from following through because this is a big financial decision. It's not something to be taken lightly. How did you prepare yourself financially for this path? You mentioned your savings, you've mentioned some loans, making sure that you had everything in place. And then with that, is there anything you wish you had done differently or maybe hadn't considered?
Yeah, definitely. Both good questions. So, what I did to prepare myself, what a lot of people don't understand is if you really put in the effort, and depending what schools you apply to, like you're not paying sticker price for these schools. It's very daunting, the price for a graduate school program, and I completely understand that. However, a lot of these schools offer financial aid, a lot of these schools offer scholarships. I applied to maybe too many schools because honestly, I didn't know where I'd land on the spectrum of schools. And I was very fortunate enough to get multiple scholarships to these schools, and HBS was able to offer me some financial aid as well. So I'm not paying sticker price. That being said, it is not a novel amount of money that I need to pay for school. And on top of that, you're giving up your income for 2 years. You still have to pay living expenses. And if you want to be part of like honestly some of the networking that involves paying for trips, that involves going to dinners and some of like the hidden expenses of MBA that people don't really talk about, and it's not on like the list the school provides you. Things I did differently, I had savings. I had a solid amount of savings. I like to think I was pretty fiscally responsible the few years I was working before my MBA program. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to minimize the amount of loans I wanted to take. So I'm like, I will go through all my savings. I will liquidate my stock portfolio that wasn't non-retirement, to pay everything off. And then I'll take some loans, but it'll be less than if I didn't do all this. Unfortunately for me, the market has been pretty hot the past year, and the returns that people have gotten on the market pretty heavily outweigh the interest rate for the loan that I took out. So, you can never predict the market. Maybe it would have gone the other way and I would have been the smart one. But that's the way to look at it. That being said, I think even the loans I'm taking out would make people hesitant for sure. And maybe this is not the most novel advice, but scared money don't make money. And the way I look at it is yes, it's expensive, but it's opening up all these doors that hopefully, like the money I'm taking out now, the debt I'm taking out now, is a drop in the bucket 20 years down the line. And if you look at some of the people that come out of Harvard Business School, like those are the people who are like the CEOs of companies, startups, founders, all this stuff. And these student loans I'm taking out, hopefully, are just it's nothing big in the future. And I'm a very risky person. I like to think I'm not risk averse. So I'm willing to take this risk. I'm willing to take this bet on myself, even at the daunting vision of loans to be able to open up some doors in the future.
And I think there are two key things that you just mentioned. One of them is that this was not a decision that you made on a whim. You had it fully thought out. You had the savings and you were willing to put in the work so that you don't end up eyeball deep in debt by the time you graduate. And secondly, you're looking at this like it's an investment. It's an investment that looks different than a Roth IRA or something similar, but I always say that the best investment you can ever make is in yourself. You're playing the long game. This isn't for right now, this is for the rest of your life.
hmm Yeah, absolutely. You gotta, the way they framed it, it's like it's a 20-year decision. It's not just like a few-year decision. And if you do the math on it, like, oh, like if I continue making my income and perhaps I get whatever X% raise every year, then it doesn't make sense to pay this money, lose 2 years of income. And you know what? It's not for everyone. Perhaps you're absolutely correct. Maybe it doesn't make sense for you if this is like the industry you want to be in. But for me personally, I saw the ROI over a span of 20, 30-year career as opposed to just looking at it in a few year span.
Yeah, and you were able to save because you had a few years of work under your belt. The downside of that is because you were in the working world for a few years, you're out of practice of being a student. Was it difficult for you to get back into the habit of studying after taking so much time off?
Yeah, I was actually very excited for it. I know there's a lot of people who like don't like school. School isn't for them, and that was me for a little bit while. But back when we were at University of Florida together, I actually got my MS, a Master's in International Business. It's a common program that people do at the University of Florida in conjunction with their undergrad degree. And I took grad level courses when I was there, and I really enjoyed the grad level courses as opposed to the undergrad. The undergrad courses, to me, and perhaps this was just maybe more an immature mentality at that time when I was younger, but it felt like I just had to memorize information and then regurgitate it for an exam, forget it, move on to the next topic. As opposed to the grad level courses, it's more like intellectual conversations and it's more like thinking higher level and it's less about like, oh, I need to get a grade, I need to get a B or an A or whatever to move on to the next course. It's more about learning and hearing people who've done it and practicing with other people who are interested in the topics. And when I did those courses at the end of the University of Florida, I really enjoyed them. And similarly, when I got to campus here in grad school, I again also really enjoy the courses. I will say it's very HBS is probably one of the more academic focused MBA programs compared to some of the other peer schools. So there is a lot of homework. There is a lot of reading. Classes are Monday through Friday every single day, multiple hours a day. So it gets exhausting on top of everything else you have to do. And it's almost like more time, even though, like, let's say the class is only like 2.5 hours, 4 hours a day. And I would work like maybe 8, 9, 10 hours previously a day in a full time job. Those 4 hours plus homework for the next day, plus you have to socialize, plus you have to do some recruiting, plus you have to like network, like all those like add up and like it's exhausting. There's no like when you finish work and you go home or whatever, you log off, close your laptop, that's it. Generally, like most people, like you're done. There's no homework. They're like you're done for the day, you get to relax. As opposed to this, you finish class and like you're just on. You're on all the time. But I will say it's champagne problems. I'm like very lucky. Whenever I find myself complaining, I just like look down and I look at like my case and it says Harvard Business School on it. And I just feel so grateful to be in the position I'm in, surrounded by the people I'm in, listening to wherever. If I'm like triple booked for something on my calendar, it's because like I'm grabbing dinner with friends or there's a startup founder in town like coming to go speak or I'm going to go play team sports, which I haven't been able to do in a while. And it's just like there's all these incredible opportunities while I'm in school.
Which makes sense because you are choosing to be there. It's something you are wanting to do for yourself, so you are going to care more. It's
Mhm.
going to be higher level conversations, deeper subject matter, and it's not just regurgitating information for an exam. And it part of it is because undergrad is a place people kind of just go to. It's more of an expectation where you graduate high school, you're going to go to college. That is what society has taught us all throughout growing up. So that's what we do. It's going back to school where you are actively making that decision for yourself and not because that's what you're quote unquote supposed to do. So now your time is more intentional. My coach likes to call it a high class problem when you don't have a lot of time on your hands and maybe you feel stressed out about it all, but it's because that time is being spent well. It's the sports, the building connections, the studying, and the class time that all adds up, but it's all adding up for you to reach your next level. It's a decision you made for yourself after clearly thinking something through.
Yeah, I think that was a perfect analysis of what we just discussed. So A plus for you, Jess.
Thank you. I've been practicing my active listening skills.
Yeah, I think undergrad is just kind of an extension of high school, even though it's not compulsory. To your point, expectation, and you're not really focused on what you're trying to accomplish with undergrad. Mostly, not for everyone. And yeah, I can't imagine what it's like being a self-employed business owner like you. I'm sure it's stressful. I have peers who do the same thing, where it's like if you don't put in the work, you're not getting paid, or like you don't know how to pay your bills, or you're not going to go forward. There's no career trajectory. No one's going to promote you. Like you have to put in the work, and then that's it. Like your success is directly tied to you, which I'm sure could be very scary, but also extremely fulfilling.
Yeah, being self employed is my investment in myself, and it comes with similar time management and financial planning like that it takes to go back to school. What have been some of the biggest challenges behind making this transition from work back to academic life?
Biggest challenges. Yeah. I think a big one is it's 2 years, and 2 years may seem like a long time, but it really flies by. Like I'm more than halfway done with school at this point. And you only get one shot at this. And the idea is like you have this expectation, you're using this degree, you're paying all this money to fulfill whatever goals you have going into it. And if you don't get it done in a 2 year span, then like you feel you were maybe a failure. Maybe you didn't take advantage of all the opportunity that you had at HBS. And there is a plethora of opportunity. And even now, I feel this way a bit. I feel like maybe I could have done more the first year to explore other industries, or maybe networking more people, or maybe I should have started a business. Maybe I will start a business this next year. I don't know. Luckily, I have one more year and I feel pretty energized when I get back to school. But there is this very high expectation that, oh, you're going to HBS, that means you're going to accomplish like all these things, or whether it's HBS or whatever MBA program or grad school that you're going to do, people are very happy for you. Like, oh, you're going to go get your degree. You don't want to come out of it and you're doing something completely unrelated, or like you didn't leverage your degree, or maybe you're back in the same spot that you were in before. And people have these expectations for you of, oh, I thought you were getting your degree to go follow your dreams. Like, what happened? And you're like, well, life happened. Life happened, and we're back to where we are. I think that's the biggest one. Besides that, like transition wise, there's a lot of travel in MBA programs. I am not a stranger to travel, so very new to that. The other thing I will say is everyone jumps into my class is 900 people, which is a ton of people, and there's 2 years of classes. Other MBA programs are smaller. You're surrounded by all these people who are generally in the same age range. Everyone's generally new to each other, and it's like a mini high school, mini undergrad again, where like you're surrounded by all these social scenes, and like you want to like make your friends, you want to make lifelong friends, but you also want to get all this other stuff done that I just talked about. So like fitting back into like a whole like social dynamic can be overwhelming for a lot of people, especially if perhaps you're more introverted. Like it's very overwhelming, and a lot of people at this point in time have partners they have to think of, so maybe they're managing relationships that are long distance. Maybe their partner moved for them, and you have to focus on like your career, your classmates, all that. But you also have to balance a partner. There's just a lot to take in all at once. It's very overwhelming. I'm lucky, or maybe unlucky, to come in as single, but I was able to just focus on myself, and I didn't have other responsibilities, as opposed to have some classmates who have children. And I can't even imagine trying to be a father or a mother, and also do all the encompassing activities that a business school has to offer.
Yeah, it is a big time commitment. And if you have other obligations, you need to be able to factor that in. And maybe that means going very part time or online, or knowing that you'll need to put your life on hold so you can propel yourself forward later. Again, bringing it back to that bigger picture mindset, that long term investment. I think the way you're doing it is smart and it works for you, so that you can fully invest your time and energy into this one thing and not stress yourself out about juggling so many different things at one time. But I want to jump back to networking, but fall under the topic of making friends, because I remember I went to go visit you. I think the semester had just started or it was about to start, since I was in town for my grandfather's 90th birthday, and you didn't even have a bed frame yet. Your
Thanks,
stuff was
Jess. We
still
needed
in
that
boxes.
info.
I mean, hopefully you have a bed frame now,
I have a bed
but
frame.
how was it for you with making friends? I know you to be pretty extroverted, so I want to add to that question and ask if you can talk about what you've observed with other people's experiences and if you've noticed anyone falling behind in the friend department.
Absolutely. It's been a year in now, and I've been lucky enough to make some awesome friends. But I will say, like, even now, like, there's this whole dynamic where, like, you don't know where to invest your time. And at the very beginning of it, there's all these students, and everyone emphasizes networking. So you want to be friends with everyone. You know, meet as many people as possible. Like, you invested all this money, you don't know where these people are going to be afterwards. Perhaps they'll be your coworkers. Perhaps they can help you out in your career. Or perhaps they could just be good friends and support systems. However, that's not feasible for 900 people. And how HBS does it, and a lot of MBA programs do something similar. They break up like the broader classes into smaller cohorts. At HBS, they call it a section. And in this section, there's about 90 people. So you're able to make a bit more deeper bonds because it's more condensed. It's 90 people. You're a bit closer to them. You take your classes with these people every single day. So you get closer to these people. However, 90 people is still a lot. So even then, you got to find your group within the section. I know people who love their section and do everything with their section, and there's maybe people that like the section isn't their vibe, or perhaps they're finding personalities don't align as much, and they meet friends through other means and through other sections, through trips, through clubs, and it is something it's tough because you get put in this bubble and you want to be accepted by your peers. You want to have like your social groups. You'd like to be invited to things. And I think everyone feels that way. And at times it's not feasible to invite everyone, or it's not feasible to be friends with everyone. And perhaps there's some people who were a bit lucky, or maybe they were able to be extroverted, or whatever it may be, that they're able to develop like the friend groups quicker than others. And then the people who perhaps are a bit lagging in that department will then obviously be upset that they see their peers finding those connections and maybe they aren't making those connections as much. And it's very much luck of the draw a bit, but it's also like effort. Like, you gotta like be meaningful with like the people you reach out with, the people that you build deeper bonds with, as opposed to just very broad relationships. And going to like the big events, you also gotta do like the smaller events, more intimate things. But yeah, it's people are struggling. Even a year in, like, people struggle, but I know a lot of people have found their groups right now as well, and people have made some really deep relationships.
Yeah, I made an episode on introverts versus extroverts a few weeks ago, and it can be tough to make friends. It's also why this is a good time to remind those of you listening to sign up for my next workshop, Find My Friends. If you're listening to this episode on or before Wednesday, September 25th, then you can still go sign up and receive the Zoom link, the worksheet, and the replay access. But like I said at the beginning of this episode, it's for those of you, whether you're in grad school or a new city or just don't know how to make good lasting friendships, then you should really join me on this call. It's free, it's on Zoom at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, and it's only an hour. So just go to the show notes or to justdiamondcoaching.com/friends to claim your spot, because friends are important, as Carlos was sharing, and it's stressful when you don't have your own squad to lean on. But Carlos, back to you. You've mentioned rugby, media club, keeping up with your studies, making friends, and traveling. How do you balance your quality of life with everything you're doing.
I'm not sleeping.
No, don't listen to him. This is terrible advice. My listeners know that sleep is the number one priority. We have talked about it on so many episodes. Ignore what he just said.
Which is like half a joke, but I could definitely work on my sleep schedule here. It's hard. I'm telling you, it's hard right now. I think so. What common advice a lot of people go and get before getting into your MBA program? You really got to be like focused on what you want to accomplish. Like if you want to start a startup, you have to understand you're gonna have to sacrifice other parts of your MBA. And I think it's like the common three. What they say is there's academics, there's career and recruiting, and then there's social. And generally, you only have time for two of the three, is kind of like the broad advice they give. So you got to pick which one's going to be the back burner. And this is not me going on a record saying don't do academics. Like you obviously have to put some sort of effort into academics, but perhaps you're not there to like take the most interesting classes or learn as much, engage as much with the material. And that might be okay. Maybe you're there to start a startup. Maybe you're there to like really focus on transitioning to finance recruiting and you know nothing about finance. So all you're going to do is like study finance and then transition into the finance industry. And that's also fine. Perhaps you know exactly what you want to do. Perhaps you're going back to a family business after you graduate and you're there to meet as many people as possible, make as many connections, and kind of really focus on the social scene. And there's people that do that too. And that's completely acceptable. So you got to just come in with what do you want to accomplish? And then once you get there, you'll get swept. You will get swept by like the sea of activities and you just revert back to what everyone else is doing. That happened to me in the fall semester. And you really got to check in with yourself to be like, all right, am I accomplishing the goals that I set out to accomplish here? Has those goals adapted after learning what I have to learn here? And how can you continue to fulfill those goals or work at those goals? And that's some checks that I've been doing. Like I said, fall was tough, but spring I was really able to kind of revert and focus more on the things that I wanted to get done. And I try to find a balance of things. Luckily, like team sports is something I haven't been able to do in a while. So like sometimes I'll replace that for a gym session so that it'll still be fitness. Obviously, I try to read all the cases as much as possible. Shout out to my professors so that anyone ever hears this. So I like to be prepared for class. And I think since I'm paying a lot of money to be there, like I'd like to at least engage with class, but I know people who don't. And that works for them. But yeah, I think I find balance with those, with trying to maximize the things that I'm interested in.
And that's going to be anything in life. You have to know what you're working towards so you don't get caught up in what other people are doing and what you're not doing as a result. Like grad school. If you see all your friends going to grad school, but that's not your original vision, you might get distracted. What is some advice that you might tell someone who is considering going back to school, but teeters between is it worth it or not, outside of this comparing to what other people are doing and just solely focusing on themselves when making this decision?
Exactly what you just said. I think a lot of people see it as a novelty. I mean, even I looked at it as a novelty. I'm like, yeah, like I'll get my MBA. That seems like a good path. And not that it isn't a good path. It's like, you got to know why you're getting your MBA. Like, this isn't a decision to be taken lightly. It is 2 years of your life. It is a lot of money. It doesn't even make sense. Maybe it makes sense. Maybe not at this moment. Maybe it's later on. And I think if you're going to get your MBA, you got to understand why you're getting your MBA. What are you trying to accomplish? The points that we were just making. Like, are you hoping to pivot? Are you progressing your career? Are you trying to start a business? What are you trying to get out of an MBA? Also, when you apply to MBA programs, like that's a common question you'll get asked either through an essay or through an interview. And these application reviewers get thousands of essays and they know these applications. And if you're just kind of BSing what you're trying to say, like, yeah, I think it'd be fun, perhaps I want to do this, they can sniff it from a mile away. So if you have a genuine why, I think that really help not only with your application, but like with the fulfillment that you're getting out of an MBA program, as opposed to if you don't have a why and you manage to get to an MBA program and you're kind of like wandering, watching other people fulfill their goals, like you might not feel as great.
Yeah, that's really good advice. It might not be time for you to go to grad school right after undergrad, or maybe you go back in 5 years or in your 30s or 40s. I personally believe right now in your 20s, you're going to have the most time on your hands than you will at any point in at least the next 3 decades. That doesn't mean I'm pushing for you to rush your own decision, but I am telling you that if you know you want to go back and get a master's or whatever it may be, then I highly recommend you look into doing so sooner rather than later. What I also recommend is that you don't use grad school or going back to school as a place to think about what your next move is. That's how you get lost. And I find a lot of people will lose their job and think, oh, I'll just go back to school to buy me time. Now, there's a lot of reasons that you can choose to go back to school. It could be to pivot, it could be to network, it could be to expand your knowledge or further your degree in the field that you're working in or working towards, but it's not a time holder, if that makes sense.
It's like a chicken and an egg story. Like, which one came first? I think a lot of people view as going back to school will help you discover what you want to accomplish, which is not wrong. You could absolutely use school to discover what you want to accomplish. The thing is, you should come in with an idea, a direction. You don't need to know exactly what you want to do, but you got to know like what you like to do or what your passion is or which aim are you trying to head in which direction. And maybe for some people, you completely change. You get to school, you follow that thesis, you try it out, you realize, oh my God, I actually hate this. And that's okay. And perhaps maybe you talk to your peers. This happened to me. I found out about other career paths that I had no idea about. I'm not pursuing those right now, but I find them interesting. I'm like, wow, perhaps this is something I could pursue in the future. And for example, I'll give you my story. When I was trying to understand what my why was, I went to my local library while I was in San Diego, and I literally got a notebook and I wrote down things I'm good at, things I'm not good at, things I like doing, what energizes me, what's my passion. I texted my friends saying like, what do you think I'm good at? Like, describe my personality in a few words, like all this stuff. And I had it all written down in a journal. And it was like that numbers meme where like all the numbers are like all up and you're like trying to figure out like what does it mean? What does it mean? And after a while I had this almost like an epiphany where I'm like, I feel really energized doing storytelling. And I think you can remember back to our undergrad days when we talk about the things that would happen on the weekend on a Monday. And I would live for those moments. And I would just love telling stories. And I don't think there's generally a professional career for storytelling like that. But I think storytelling comes in many forms, many different forms. And I think media and entertainment is kind of like the industry I'm generally trying to head towards. And that was my direction. And I don't know what career path I'm going to go, but I'm like, I know I'm passionate about storytelling and I know media and entertainment is like the business of storytelling, whether it's in movies, films, books, comedy, poems, I don't know, songs, music. There's all these different sectors and niches of storytelling. And I felt my thesis, for example, coming into school was if I can at least working in this industry of media and entertainment, whether I'm either enhancing the experience for other people to enjoy stories, or I'm providing tools for storytellers to tell their stories in new ways, then I feel much more fulfilled on the impact that I'm putting in, day out, rather than the industries I was impacting previously.
And it's so important to find something that is fulfilling you when you know it wasn't your previous career path. And I do think you're a good storyteller. You're very captivating when you share something.
Stop.
And even when I think about my own business, I tell stories. I tell stories in my content, in my emails, in my podcasts. I'm usually bringing up a client story, a friend's story, my own story. We all connect through storytelling. So the way that you want to bring this to life, I think, is amazing. And I think it was a really smart way for you to be able to find your why. But at the end of the day, what Carlos and I are saying is you need a reason behind making this decision of going back to school. It doesn't necessarily mean that is the exact reason, but it's the intentionality behind making that first decision and the releasing of what happens next. Releasing the 5-year plan for after grad school or planning out exactly how this time is supposed to go. You only need a reason for committing to this journey in the first place. This is not to buy that time back.
You're just going to be stressed because then you'll get there and now you're on like a time limit. You're in a time crunch because you're like, okay, well now I got to figure out what I have to do because now I only have 2 years. And now you'll see, especially depending on whatever you're recruiting for, like people recruiting starts early for other career paths. A lot of them are very competitive. The people who are super passionate about whatever they're in, they're obviously going to be maybe at a better advantage than you are. And then you feel like perhaps I have to settle and just maybe I'm interested in consulting. So like I'll throw my name in that hat just because it started so early, the recruiting. And maybe it wasn't what you really wanted to do. And you start getting lost. There's just so much going on in an MBA program. And you get swept away if you don't have your North Star. And you're absolutely correct. You need like a direction, your purpose as to what you're heading towards.
Yeah, your direction and not losing sight of what that is. Now, I have two more questions left for you. So the first one is, knowing what you know now, do you wish you went back to school sooner?
So originally, I thought that answer would be yes. Just because if you want to maximize for like career trajectory, for example, some of these post MBA roles, it doesn't matter how old you are, obviously. Once you get your MBA or whatever you recruit for, then you get put in the same position as whoever else is coming out of their MBA. And there's people in my MBA program who are 24, and there's people in my MBA program who are 35, and they both recruit for the same industry. They'll be coming out in the same position, and you may look at it as like if you compare it to each other, you're like, wow, like I'm so far behind than compared to this kid. Essentially, we're in the same position, and he's like 9 years younger than me, or whatever it may be. And sometimes that feels kind of not great. But again, comparison's a thief of joy. The reason why I'd say no is because what MBA programs, a lot of them, what they do is they require at least 2 years of work experience. So you can't get your MBA program, or you can't go to an MBA program right after undergrad or right after like a master's after undergrad. And the reason they do this is a few different reasons. One, you want to learn from your peers. So if your peers don't have any work experience, very hard to learn from them. I'm surrounded by peers who are coming from like the finance world or from like the retail world, things I know nothing about. And I'm learning a lot from them just because they've had work experience and they're able to contribute to class and say like, oh, this is actually what we did at X and Y and Z company. And that's something that you wouldn't get unless you had a few years of work experience. I think the most important part though about why having a few years of work experience and why I'm happy that I had 4 years of work experience by the time I started my MBA was you don't know what you want. You don't know what you like until you go and experience out in the world. Like I was very happy with my position, my undergrad or coming out of undergrad, my career. And I did that for a few years and I realized like I'm actually not super passionate about this. And I wouldn't have known that until I did a couple of years on it. And I tried a different position at another company. And again, interesting enough, but maybe that's something I'm very passionate about. And you need to go have these different experiences. It's just like dating, really. Like you need to go have these experiences to understand what you like, what you don't like. So then when you do go to an MBA, you're more focused. You know what you want to do as opposed to kind of like, maybe I'll do this because I did this for like a year or two. And you won't know until like you're older and have a better refined vision, essentially.
Okay, I didn't know that you had to work for at least 2 years before you could go get your MBA. Learning something new over here. But wow, this was great. I know you've already provided a ton of good insight and information to my audience so far, but is there any final piece of advice or words to the wise that you want to give to the other 20 somethings listening when they're thinking about whether or not they want to go back to school?
Yeah, I think we had a lot of good snippets here that are generally the advice I'd give, but I think maybe something that we haven't touched on is when I was studying for my MBA, I was studying for the GMAT or I was working on my essays or my application, whatever it may be. I was at my desk in my room, and above my desk, I had a piece of paper that said, "Why not me?" And essentially, the message I'm trying to get across there is a lot of people self-select out. A lot of people think like, oh, I'm not smart enough to do this, or I'm not physically able to do this, or maybe I'm not attractive or talented, whatever it may be. You self-select out and you never gave it a shot, and you won't know unless you try. And I think that ties back to the point that we had in the very beginning. Just try it, see if it works out. Maybe you don't get into the MBA program, or maybe you do. I applied to many different schools because I'm like, never in my million years I think I'd get into Harvard. But I'm like, you know what? Why not just give it a shot? You know, you and me, we came from the state school. Like we don't come from the pedigree of maybe like an Ivy League, but you know what? Maybe I have a good story. Maybe I'm intelligent enough to get by on this exam. And I'm like, let's just give it a shot, see how it goes. And I was very fortunate enough to land to the position I am. And you won't know until you do it. And it's better to try something and fail than always wondering about that what if that we talked about. And for people in our age and our age demographic, like this is the perfect time to take those risks. It's only going to get harder to take risks like this when we get older.
Yeah, that's what I keep trying to tell people. Take the risk now. Take it when you're young and you're in your 20s. And also, don't knock the Gators like that. Our friend Kylie used to tell everyone the Florida Gators are the Harvard of the South. Although it is the top public university right now.
It's a
So
great
go
school.
Gators.
Go
But
Gators.
wow.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carlos, so much for coming on and discussing your experience with going back to school. I'm excited to see where this adventure takes you. Where can people find you if they want to follow your journey or ask you questions about being a full-time student?
Yeah, definitely. I think if you have some more professional questions, you can just find me on my LinkedIn. Somewhat active on LinkedIn. I know a lot of people have questions about MBA, so you could. It's just my name on LinkedIn. Besides that, if you want to see more of a day in a life of maybe a Harvard Business School student, I post pretty frequently on Instagram. At least my stories. I do a lot of travel. Jess can attest to that. So you can kind of see what the social environment is, what the balance is between being a student and being able to kind of enjoy some of the more fun parts of it. And my handle, I don't think I've ever said this before, but my handle is at Carlitos underscore PIE. Maybe I should change that now. I don't know. But maybe one day I'll be a personality in the media entertainment industry. We'll see. This is the start. I'll get on TikTok soon enough.
Yep, and all of that will be linked in the show notes per usual, but this does wrap up another episode of How to 20-something. If you liked what you heard, if you or someone you know is contemplating going back to school and what that means for your life or their life, then please pass this episode along or share it on social media and tag me when you do. And as a reminder, if you need help with this decision, you know where to find me, as all of my information is in the show notes for you to access. Otherwise, this does conclude another episode of How to 20-something. I can't wait to be in your headphones again next week with another brand new episode.